No, the guy, Johnny.
Who's Johnny?
That guy at the back there.
It's got a character. You're going to use the new clicking thing today.
What?
You know this works?
No?
You can click that and it announces the slide.
When did they do that? You can show them.
I just opened up PowerPoint today and it was like, did you know? I was like, no, I didn't. It's so handy.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll give it a go.
Yeah, we'll change over the others.
Yeah.
Who else is that? Feel good, does it?
Yep.
Cool. Boom. All right, everyone, welcome along to this month's user group meetup session. A bunch of new faces here today. Who's here new for the first time? Liar. Awesome. Great to have you along. Hopefully you enjoy the content of tonight. Obviously, you're signed up to the meetup group already. We run these once a month. Obviously, different kind of focuses each month, different content that we cover. But yeah, absolutely. If you enjoy it, tell your friends. Come along next time as well. So my name's Nick. If you haven't met me before, a lot of you have. We have the other user group leaders, Alan over there, and Daryl is our trusty cameraman. Yeah, and then we got another presenter tonight, Dan, who is downstairs letting someone in, I think. Unfortunately, Aben may not be able to make it tonight. He was supposed to be up here presenting as well, but he had a P1 at work. We all know how those go. So if he can make it along, he will. Otherwise, he sends his apologies. Bit of housekeeping. If anyone needs to go to the toilet at any time tonight, they are back past reception through the glass doors. Head towards HP. Gents is at the furthest end. Ladies is the closest end. You can get out to the toilets, no problem, but to get back in, you need an access card. And if you don't have an access card, you'll be stuck in the toilets all night. Okay, so make sure you pick one up. I think Joe, that man waving at the back. Yeah, so yeah, he's the master of the keys. So if you need use the facilities tonight, please talk to him first. Awesome. Yeah, so tonight's topic is obviously the best of Microsoft Build. So how we run things, I'll kind of just give you my thoughts on the conference. I didn't actually go, but have watched the keynotes and read a few articles about things to get some insights. So I've noticed a few kind of key themes, sort of high-level approaches to what Microsoft did at the conference. So I'll just give you my kind of opinions and some insights into that. And then we'll delve down a bit deeper with the other presenters. So Alan's going to be presenting a bunch of content that he found interesting. And likewise for Dan. And I think Dan's picking up Aben's stuff as well, since he's pretty good at that. So yeah. So yeah, we should still have a full session, aiming to finish up at about 7 p.m. tonight, plus or minus. So, who here actually watched the keynotes, or any of the build content? Is that like 3 or 4 of you? Excellent, cool. All right, so it means you can't call me out on anything. So yeah, it's obviously one of Microsoft's biggest conferences of the year. It's their premier developer conference. Whereas Ignite, which runs around sort of September timeframe, is the more generalist kind of IT Pro content in there as well. And then Inspire is the partner conference that usually runs around July each year. So those are 3 of Microsoft's biggest conferences of the year. And Build is kind of a jewel in the crown of their conferences. Previous years, there's been a lot of announcements come out of it, and this year was kind of no exception. Although I found this year there wasn't that much kind of consumer focused. More definitely focused towards developers and what you can do with products. As in previous years, there's been some kind of significant consumer announcements. But still, there were dozens of announcements that came out of the conference. There were 70 new capabilities in Azure alone that were announced during Build. And there was a lot of focus on AI this year, and the bot framework got 100 new features added to the bot framework, which is pretty impressive, just in a pretty short space of time. Sweet. Did anyone know you could do this? Like, you know these Surface pens? There's a little button at the end. You can push the button and it advances the slides. I just found that out today. It's amazing. All right, so some key themes then that I noticed from Build. So the first thing I picked up is that Microsoft 365 has been positioned as a platform. So if you're not that familiar with what Microsoft 365 is, it was introduced during the Inspire conference of July last year as kind of a licensing construct, right? So you could buy an Office 365 license, a Windows 10 license, and an EMS license, which is the Enterprise Mobility and Security Suite. You could buy all of those separately, or you could roll them all into one package called Microsoft 365. Now, kind of up until Build, it was really only discussed as a licensing concept. But from Build, what I picked up on was that it's been positioned as more of a platform, almost replacing the focus of Windows within the Microsoft ecosystem. So obviously Windows is a part of it, but the focus has shifted, to Azure as a platform and Microsoft 365 as a platform, with Windows part of that rather than Windows being kind of its own focus area. So there was a lot of content around that discussed at Build, but obviously it's laying the foundation for some future announcements and development that'll be coming out of Microsoft over the next year or so. So it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that space. The next theme is Azure expanding beyond core services. So over the last while, there's been a lot of focus on Microsoft Azure and get everything into the cloud, with raw compute IaaS stuff plus some platform services. But it's all been very focused around what's happening within the Azure data centers. Whereas this year, there's been a lot more focus around taking that content and pushing it out into the field. So things like edge computing. Taking that Azure capability and actually running it in your own data center with the use of like Azure Stack, or Azure IoT Edge, where you can take capability from Azure services and run it on a device that isn't even connected to the internet. So I found there was a lot of focus around keeping the Azure messaging going, Azure as a platform, but extending its reach out beyond just focusing on the data centers themselves. Now, along those lines, there was a huge focus on growth around AI. So Alan's going to be covering some of this content. Okay, that's right. Yep, sweet. So I won't say too much. But yeah, a huge focus around AI and the commoditization of AI as well, so making it available to the people. Next theme, cross-platform support's increasing. So Microsoft loving everyone, essentially. Don't care what device you use, as long as you're using our services. Microsoft thinks that their service is the best, and obviously have a lot of reason to believe that. They are pretty awesome at what they deliver. But extending that support across, obviously Android and iOS, wherever the customers are, Microsoft's going there to meet the customer and deliver services in whatever way they'd like to consume it. And then the last theme I picked up on was continued contribution to open source. So Microsoft's had a lot of focus around open source lately. Like the whole of what .NET Core was made available in open source. A bunch of other frameworks as well. So Microsoft's actually one of the biggest contributors to open source in the world right now, which is a far cry from where they were just a few years ago. And it seems like the pace of that's accelerating even more, where instead of closely guarding all these services to them, and charging you a license to use them, they're pretty much giving away the software as long as that software utilizes platform services along the lines of Azure and Office 365, which makes a lot of sense, really. Cool, so those are the key themes. So drilling down a bit then. So Microsoft 365, so we're just rehashing that. So as you can see from the slide, it's a roll-up of Windows, Office, and EMS capability altogether. And as I said, Microsoft's really aligning Microsoft 365 as a platform to build on. So to allow developers to utilize the services of Microsoft 365 as a broader picture, rather than just focusing on, say, Windows development itself. And obviously the incentive for businesses to adopt Microsoft 365 licensing is that they get the bundle at a discounted rate. But the more companies that actually adopt that licensing scheme, the more developers can rely on those capabilities being available. So it just increases the whole ecosystem to allow people to sort of put the effort into developing for it. A key observance as well is that Windows is no longer at the core. And even if you look at this slide, how Microsoft's put it together, it's like Windows plus Office plus EMS. It's not like Windows plus Office plus EMS, or even having Windows in the middle. So, the way I pick up from that is that Windows is still important. It's still sort of a good revenue earner for Microsoft, but it's not the be-all and end-all. Right? So, if you look what happened in the Windows Phone environment, for example, that product is pretty much dead because everyone's got either Android or an iOS device. So instead of fighting against that, just go with it. Customers have these devices, to support them, give them the services that they want on the devices that they like. And this is actually the first build conference ever that didn't have a Windows keynote. So another pretty big observance, right? Whereas, in the past there was a lot of focus around Windows and Windows development. Like the whole conference was actually used to be called Build Windows, like a few years ago. So you can see how that's changed remarkably, and kind of the trajectory that Microsoft's going on here. So the whole experience of Microsoft 365 is that it allows you to have this really fluid experience across each of the products within the system. So be able to move from your PC to your phone, using the same software, having your data available everywhere, and those services really coming towards you rather than you having to change hats and change context switch constantly to actually get to your data. So the vision for all that was kind of summed up by Joe Belfiore. Said he sees Microsoft 365 as being where the world gets its best work done. So obviously a lot of into that statement. It's a pretty lofty statement. But if you look at the services that are available to all of us to use, it kind of really does sum that up in my mind. There's no other company really that gives you that breadth of experience around productivity that Microsoft 365 does give you. And underlying Microsoft 365 is the Microsoft Graph. Anyone here recognize or know what the Microsoft Graph is? Yeah, a few of you. Cool. So for those of you that don't, essentially it's an underlying mechanism that stretches across all of Microsoft services. So all of Microsoft 365, and there's even like a LinkedIn graph and some other graphs that they developed as well. And what it does is it stores activity and connections. So for example, if I open an email that Alan sent to me, the graph recognizes that we have a connection there. And there could be a document that we've been working on together. So it recognizes there's a connection there. Within that document, there could be some customer reference. So that could be referenced in, say, Dynamics 365. Right? So there's all these connections between the data we work with and the people we work with and the devices that we work with. And all of those connections and activity is stored in the Microsoft Graph. And what that does is allows us to actually gain insights into the type of work that we do. So if any of you have used Delve, Delve is a perfect example of a tool that uses the Microsoft Graph to show you that, hey, I've just opened a document that Alan worked on a few weeks ago, so I may want to talk to him about this document, because he'd have some insight into it. And there's two new services that are powered by the Microsoft Graph, which Alan's going to be talking about, called Timeline and Sets, which is two new Windows features. But it essentially looks at what you've been doing, what all the activity that's been stored in the graph over the past while, to allow you to actually go back in time and see what you've been working on, whether that was on your phone or on your PC or on any device that is kind of joined to the graph. So pretty powerful stuff. Windows isn't forgotten though. There's been a lot of activity, and the pace of development on Windows is almost like increasing. It seems there's like all these different features coming out all the time. So stats are there's 700 million active Windows 10 devices out there in the world, and 200 million corporate users currently use Windows 10.
That's
So-
organisations.
The organizations, not just users.
Yeah.
Okay, even bigger, massive, right? And during build 1803, which is the April 2018 update, was released into general availability, which includes a whole lot of new capabilities and features, and it's pretty much Daryl's favourite tool at the moment, eh?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, loving it.
Yeah.
That was
If
a bit
you-
in jest.
Yeah, if you have a few devices plugged in, then be prepared to reconnect them and reorient them with the programs that you're using. But other than that, yeah, it's good.
Some pretty cool functionality, but yeah, it's got a few hiccups. Apparently, it doesn't support some SSD drives as well, like Intel and Toshiba.
My Windows 10 account.
Oh, really? That doesn't work either.
Yeah, I'm still fighting for it.
Good luck, yeah. The option should be. Hopefully, there's a fix for that soon.
Driver.
Yeah, it's frustrating when that happens, eh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is new build.
Yeah.
I don't want to look.
Has anyone else installed this new build? I have, yeah. Oh, I've got a bunch of you. Oh, yeah, cool.
Any problems? Niggles? No? All perfect?
There's a minor known issue with PowerShell.
Minor known
Minor?
issue with PowerShell.
Font
some of it
is
autocomplete doesn't
perfect.
work.
The font, the display is
Oh, yeah.
The font is
New
perfect.
Yep.
It's good.
Font
That's
Yeah.
good.
with edge is perfect.
Okay.
Than before.
Nice. All right. Cool. Yeah, so I think Alan's going to be covering some of the features there as well.
Maybe.
Maybe. We'll see. Cool. Yeah. No, I mean, it's far from a dead product, so I don't know. I mean, look at there. It'll go on for a while, at least. But yeah, I mean, the pace of delivery there is pretty crazy. Every time I look at it, you know, I'm running the insider ring at home, and every time I log into my machine, it seems like there's been an update. It's like, hi there, this won't take a while.
It's every week, isn't it, on that build?
Yeah, I think so. It seems even more often than that. But I don't know. It's just a perception thing. Yeah. The other big platform is Azure, obviously. So we've been talking about the 365 stuff. Here's the Azure stuff. So Azure's growing phenomenally. It's available in over 50 regions around the world now, and kind of more and more added all the time. As I said before, there's 70 new Azure capabilities that were announced at build alone. And as we go on throughout the year, as things just keep on cropping up that you don't even expect. So yeah, it's quite exciting, and I'm quite interested in that. So yeah, and Satya Nadella mentioned that he sees Azure as being the world's computer. So any capability that you'd want to use or any need for computing that you'd want, should be able to be delivered out of Azure. And you see all the capability that's going into it now. There's just more and more stuff at Azure all the time, and you can definitely see that goal's kind of definitely on its way to being achieved. But as I said before, that the core of the intelligent cloud being Azure is great, but there are some use cases where you don't want to have to ship data to the cloud and back all the time. Let's say, for example, some of the cognitive services, like if you're running AI on a camera, every time the camera takes a video feed, you don't want to have to ship that out to Azure and then back again. So it gets processed out there and says, oh yeah, that's a cat, and then sends the result back to you, because that can be quite laggy, and you have some issues if you don't have good connectivity. So there was a lot of focus at Build around the intelligent edge. So the intelligent edge, well, the edge is really where data is created. So if you think about that camera example, you're actually recording the camera data where it is, wherever you are in the world, and that data needs to get processed. So currently, the capability to do that exists in cognitive services in Azure, which means that you have to ship that data out there in order to get a process to come back. But the focus of all that's changing. So the first cognitive service to be available outside of Azure data centers is the custom vision API. So that ties in with what they're doing with cameras, and that you can actually take that processing as to be able to process that visual information and actually process that locally on the device itself, rather than having to ship the data up into Azure and back again. Yeah, and those models are obviously trained in the cloud. So you essentially you're always taking best practice, best capability of what's available in Azure with all the updates that go into it, and you can take a snapshot of that capability, download it onto your device, and run that locally on your device. And then take the content of that, and you can even retrain your model back in the cloud again. So it's this whole big hybrid, fluid experience between the intelligent cloud out there and then the edge devices. Yeah, and obviously IoT Edge is one of the pillars that are supporting that vision for Microsoft. The other ones being Azure Stack, where you take a subset of Azure capability and you can actually run it within your own data center. Like in New Zealand, I think it's Rivera and Spark and Datacom. Umbrella, yeah. They're like, yeah, so those organizations have Azure Stack available in New Zealand. So if you have any compute workloads that can't leave the country, go see one of them, and you can get the experience of running it on Azure, but within New Zealand. So that's pretty cool. So some of the devices that get enabled by having this capability, there was a pretty awesome demo of a drone from DJI that actually has the custom vision API loaded onto it. Right? So you can set this drone free, and the example they gave was it would go over some pipes and check the pipes for any defects, so you know if there's any maintenance required on them. So using custom vision capability of the AI capabilities in Azure, literally running on that device, it can fly over these pipes and visually inspect them, and then if it notices there's any issue, it can raise an alert. Whereas previously, that stream of video would have to get shipped out to Azure, get processed in the cloud, and then come back again. So it's pretty powerful to actually take that capability and run it locally. There's also that other camera in the bottom right there, which does a similar sort of thing. So this would be great for any disconnected environments. So if you like running it on a ship or in a factory that can't be connected to the internet, you can do the same sort of thing. So how it works is that essentially there's a container that runs on those cameras, and that container contains the logic of the custom vision API service. So the camera is processing its own data locally. Then when it does connect up to the internet, it can ship the results of that data out and even download new capabilities from Azure, a new version of the container software to have better capabilities. So pretty cool. A lot of focus around that intelligent edge sort of stuff that I noticed during build. And then the other kind of cool thing is Azure Sphere. So this is a service that essentially looks after IoT devices. So if you think of, you can see it happening now, but definitely over the next few years, pretty much every device is going to be connected to the internet. Right? Your fridge, your washing machine, your microwave, your stove and oven, all these sort of devices will be connected to the internet. And because they're connected to the internet, there's the possibility of them getting hacked. Right? And if you're leaving the security of those devices up to each individual manufacturer, you can imagine it's going to be like a pretty big mess with not much standards going on, where some device manufacturers would be more capable than others at actually supporting things. So you can imagine if your stovetop gets hacked and it's forced in the on position, so you have your hot plate busy going out and you can't actually turn it off, or your fridge could get locked and you actually can't open the fridge, and you get some ransomware, some hacker in Russia, wants you to pay him $20 so you can open your fridge. So all those possibilities, are possible if you don't have the right security on these devices. So most of these devices run what's called an MCU, which is a microcontroller unit. And this MCU contains a few chips, essentially like that one on the top right. And on those chips is the memory for the device, the operating system, and the software that runs the device. So all the electronic goods would essentially have one of these. As I said before, there's quite a wide variety of different types you can get. So what Azure Sphere's kind of go-to-market is that you'll have a Microsoft-controlled device to run all these IoT devices. So it's composed of 3 different capabilities. So you have the secured MCU. So Microsoft creates custom silicon, makes it available to device manufacturers, and that custom silicon is locked down with all the security knowledge Microsoft has gained from all the years it's been running data centers and Xbox and all these other devices of theirs. And as well as the actual custom silicon, it also includes a secured OS. So it's a Linux OS, which Microsoft has customized and secured to be able to run on these devices. And to go along with that, actually provides the cloud security capability, obviously posted out of Azure. So these devices will always be kept up to date with the latest security patches, and it means that the actual device manufacturers themselves don't need to worry about that. They can kind of outsource those security issues to Microsoft to look after them. So yeah, I thought that was a pretty cool kind of update of where devices will be going in the future. Another big focus is AI, as I said, specifically around commoditizing AI. So what this means is that just a few years ago, if you wanted to do any of that custom vision stuff or do any machine learning or whatever, it was like a huge undertaking. If you were a developer wanting to build a bot, you'd have to go to a lot of effort to actually build this bot so you can understand what people are talking about. It was pretty much not impossible. You'd write it off. Whereas Microsoft's actually making all that AI logic democratized, essentially. So anyone can use it. Right? You just spin up an Azure service and boom, you've got access to all these awesome AI capabilities. You just write the wraparound code which leverages the services. So a huge focus, I noticed, around that commoditizing of AI, and that it's like nothing special anymore. This is, standard practice. Anyone can use it, but it's pretty awesome, the capabilities it delivers. And Alan's going to be bringing you more of the AI stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah? Yes? Nice. Cross-platform support. Microsoft loves everyone. Pretty much everyone. Let's go put that in brackets. So yeah, I've noticed a lot of trend around this. Obviously, support for Android and iOS, obviously. But one of the interesting things that I found was support for Cortana and Alexa living together. So I kind of didn't see this coming, but I thought it was pretty cool. So essentially, you can run Cortana on an Amazon Echo, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, like they actually demoed it.
If we set my computer to New Zealand, there's no Cortana.
No Cortana in New Zealand.
Doesn't support. If I set the language and reading.
Oh yeah? Is that still a thing? I thought that was fixed.
And then it doesn't work.
No, I had to put mine to United Kingdom.
Oh, okay.
And then it understands my accent perfectly.
Right, I just said, right. Okay, I think mine set to US. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
region is US
Yeah.
states and it works.
Cool. But yeah, so this was demoed at Build, where essentially you have an Amazon Echo there, and you can say like, "Hey Alexa, open Cortana," and then Cortana's like, "Hello, how can I help you?" So it's pretty awesome. And then likewise on a Windows 10 device, you can ask Cortana to open Alexa, because obviously each of those virtual assistants have different capabilities. Cortana is more focused towards your work life and can see your schedules and send emails and that sort of thing, whereas Alexa is more tailored towards your personal life. Turning on off devices and calling an Uber and that sort of thing. So the demo they gave, I think, was you can fire up Cortana and say, "Hey Cortana, what's in my calendar for this afternoon?" And then Cortana's like, "Oh, you've got a meeting with Bill at 2 p.m. You can say, "Okay, Cortana, could you send Bill an email to say I'm going to be running a few minutes late?" And she's like, "Okay, I'll do that." And then you say, "Cool, Cortana, open Alexa." And then Alexa's like, "Hi," and you're like, "Hey Alexa, could you organize a Uber for me to go to Bill's meeting?" And then Alexa's like, "Sure, I can do that now for you." So,
But does she call and pretend to be a human?
i.e. like Google Duplex?
Yeah.
Yeah. Not quite. Yeah. That is pretty cool, actually. You guys must have all seen the Google Duplex demo. If you haven't, YouTube it. You'll see it. It's pretty awesome. But yeah, so cross-platform support beyond just the whole iOS and Android sort of thing. It's actually like Cortana and Alexa working together to give a good experience to end users. This is coming soon. It's not available just yet, but I think there's going to be a private preview launch soon. Or I don't know. It'll be available in the next few months, I think. Cool. And the other big one is Microsoft Launcher for Enterprise. So who uses Microsoft Launcher on their Android? 2 people. Oh, it must be more than that, surely. If you have an Android, look at Microsoft Launcher. It's pretty awesome. especially if you deal with Microsoft stuff in your day job. The integration story is just great. Everything just kind of works. It's almost like a Windows phone running on Android without the tiles. It's
I prefer the tiles.
yeah, the tiles are cool, but yeah. So yeah, Microsoft Launcher has been available for ages as kind of a personal thing that you can stick on your phone. Whereas this announcement actually includes Microsoft Launcher for Enterprise, which will be coming soon.
You should ask if anyone knows it by the former name of Arrow Launcher. It might be a few
Oh
more
yeah,
names.
yeah. Oh, anyone know that? Arrow Launcher? No? No, zero hands. Still no. Yeah, so this essentially allows companies to provide a customized, tailored experience, to their corporate devices. So, along the lines of, kind of what Intune can do in managing your device, and like what MAM can do, like mobile application management. But it goes beyond that. It's kind of your whole phone, the interface to your phone, how you use it every day, integrated and customized, and having that corporate flavor that you want to put onto it, just to make life easier for your end users rather than having to set up their phones separately. So that'll be coming soon as well. And last but not least, Microsoft loves open source. So it was announced that Microsoft is the largest corporate contributor on GitHub, which is pretty impressive. They've done a huge amount of work in contributing to the open source community and making all that code available on GitHub for anyone to access and download and contribute to. And also 40% of Azure VMs actually run Linux, which is another pretty interesting story. Probably not that surprising these days, but a few years ago, if someone told you that, you'd be like, what? That doesn't make sense. But yeah, I found that pretty interesting. And then there's a lot of other activity as well around AKS, Kubernetes and stuff, which Dan's going to be talking about. Just a lot of focus around that. Those are my kind of key theme takeaways, looking at the whole conference at a high level. Pretty interesting stuff happening in the Microsoft landscape, constantly shifting sands, getting over some of the legacy of the past and looking towards the future and seeing, meeting their customers where they are, essentially, rather than trying to force solutions down the customer's throat. Microsoft wants you to love them, not be forced to use them. So yeah, it was a pretty cool conference. I would love to attend one day, but we'll see about that. I found watching the streams pretty cool. So definitely next year, or even like Ignite later on this year, wake up at 3 a.m. It's worth it. You can catch some of the content firsthand. Cool. All right. So plenty more to come. Alan's up next. And swap over.
Yep, just snort a little on over there.
This one.
Yep.
Oh, you can plug in. I can take that away.
Yeah, it is. It's not turning on. Let's get here you go. Please wait.
Bing bong bing.
Ding dong dong.
Is that cool? Right. I'm going to cover my favourite bits around AI and also some of the Microsoft 365 stuff. Really, mostly around what's happening with Office and some things that are going on with Flow as well. I haven't even tried this, whether this works. Probably.
There we go.
I only learned that from Nick today. It's amazing. It's worth coming to these user groups. So let's start with cognitive services. So I've done a few presentations on this in the past, and also recently we did the content moderator at the Azure Bootcamp as well, which is using one of these services. But Microsoft have done a whole bunch of updates to the range of services that you can just leverage sort of out of the box. One of the ones with the image recognizer at the moment, if you upload an image, it kind of comes back and says, I think it's one of these things that's in your image. But now if you upload an image, it will say, well, I saw some fruit, I saw some people, I saw a desk, and I saw like various things in that picture, not just the one thing. And it will even get down to, if you upload a picture of all sorts of different fruit in a fruit basket, it will tell you the range of fruit that are in there, rather than its fruit. Right? So there were apples and oranges and bananas and things like that, which is quite good. They're also having there'll be a video indexer, which also follows the same sort of pattern. So it'll actually recognise things that are in the video that are going on. So there, potentially the opportunity there that if somebody uploaded a video to your website, you could post it in, and then make sure there was nothing hidden on certain frames within the video that you didn't want everyone to see. Maybe it was maybe racy or adult content you wanted to call out. So be able to do some of that detection. For speech recognition, you're going to be able to actually upload samples of your own speech. So you'll actually be able to recognize you speaking as opposed to somebody else speaking. And there's an example later on I'll show you where they use that in a meeting environment. So you can actually take a recording as long as it's got like a known voice. Sounds like something the CIA would do, or those programs you watch where they put it through a machine and it says, oh, yeah, this was this person saying something. But in the past, it could tell the difference between different people speaking. But now, as long as as it has sort of some sort of voice pattern, it can actually recognize who was speaking within that room. The next one is being able to take your own voice and customize the speech that comes back. So you can imagine that if you don't like Cortana speaking to you in its voice, you could upload your own voice as a pattern and it would speak back to you. But same thing for like bots that now have sort of text-to-speech capability. It'll actually be able to talk back in a voice that's more natural to the country rather than it be the synthesized version. They actually did this as well. They actually took JFK's voice and had him talking. They uploaded pre-recordings. It sounds kind of odd. I'm not too sure if I want to hear my own voice. I don't tend to watch the videos that Daryl records because I find myself sort of odd sort of listening to the way you speak. But anyway, if you feel like it, yeah, you can create your own bot that answers questions for people in your own voice. The speech-to-speech translation, so before you could do like speech-to-text, so you could take a bot that kind of like somebody types some text in or they spoke to it and you translate it to text. But now it's going to just be able to do speech-to-speech. And they actually showed this in an example where you might have a meeting in a cafe or with someone who's doesn't speak the same language as you, and you can kind of talk into it, and then the other person would have theirs speak to them in their language, and you can kind of converse. It's not full-blown language translation that you could use at the UN or something like that, but if you just had a meeting with somebody and you didn't both speak the same language, then you could quite happily converse using this capability. The text-to-analytics does now, it identifies its own entities, so you can say, find things that look like company names. So it's not just finding words within there and saying, I think these are common words or phrases. You can actually get it to find these specific entities, and there's a whole bunch of preloaded ones within there, which is kind of a sort of crossover with Lewis, because that does a bit of that as well. And in that space, the Lewis, they've sort of realized that most people use it with bots in terms of like understanding text. So they're going to create some packaged solutions so you can stand up a Lewis service with bots at the back and everything else you might need to deploy that as a developer rather than separated services that kind of come as one package. The Q&A Maker, anyone use Q&A Maker? Awesome for creating very simple bots. No one used that. Just go qnamaker.ai and create a little question-answer bot. And it's really easy to just take that and package it up and deploy it into Teams. So you could have a company Q&A bot just loaded into Teams to answer everyday questions about HR and benefits and things like that. But now it's gone actually GA, so that was actually at build. And then there's the Bing Visual Search. Not too sure how useful it might be, but you can sort of take a photo of something, upload it to Bing, and it would say, here's 10 other photos like the photo you just gave me. Right. Which does sort of use some of that kind of object detection stuff as well, because it's just going, what are the things in this picture? Oh, what other images have I got that are like that? Right. But I'm sure someone can come up with a way of using that. And then there's an SDK that was made generally available around that. Let's move along. So the one I really liked was this updates to basically to Azure Search. So they've added cognitive services around the Azure Search to make it not just give you answers from an index that you upload. Has anyone used Azure Search? There's 2 people. Oh, okay, I better start with what Azure Search is. So Azure Search is essentially an indexer and a search tool. So you can upload to it. You could point it at a database and get it to index the rows in the database and then ask it questions about the content. It actually understands geolocations, and it actually there's a whole bunch of mathematics because the world's round, not flat, according to most people. So it actually works out, proper geolocations based on it being a sphere. But at the moment, you pretty much have to. There's limited sources that you can point it to, or you can just upload sort of your own index into it. But that's kind of it's sort of limited, but has some sort of use other than just like trying to search over your own blobs and file names. But what they've done is added 2 more services to this: a data ingestion piece, and then an enrichment using cognitive services, which are, funny enough, the ones that we just mentioned on the previous slide. So basically what you can do is take your customer data. It can be stored in multiple sources. Might be just Azure blob storage and you just got a bunch of files. Can be multiple types. This list is like, as long as you're ARM, there's like ... but it could be XML files, text files, binary files, as long as it can read them. And then basically it ingests all of that content. And then you apply cognitive services, some of that being the entity extraction. So say find names of companies, find people names in there, work out what the sentiment is of this document or this content that I'm pulling in. And then you can also extend that with your own custom classifications and your own AI. So you can take what it found, pass that through your own machine learning model, and then have that come back with additional content that you might then enrich the document with. So what you end up with at the end of the day is basically annotated documents. So in your index, you not only got the reference to this document, but then a whole bunch of other metadata about that document. And then you can use the search index, Azure Search, as you would normally, to then go query that information. Right? This sounds much better than SharePoint search, I must say.
Yes.
And actually, if I could just put this over top of SharePoint search, that would actually be quite good. But if you've got like a whole backlog of content, it'll even go against the file system. You can point at that and get it to index a whole bunch of files. That would actually probably be better than using SharePoint search to do it. But that's kind of your choice. So they showed an actual example using this that was pretty good. They actually took all of the files and content that the US government released about the JFK shooting. So they indexed it all, right? They had these kind of very badly typed documents that were then obviously scanned in as PDFs. And they had even handwritten documents as well. So they used all of the cognitive services to recognize OCR, basically the documents, even recognize handwriting. So you can do a search for like Oswald, and you'll actually find where that appeared in both cases, in whether it was handwriting or something else. And then they just wrap it around. You can quickly, there's an example of kind of just building this solution over Azure Search that actually has all the refiners and everything else all pre-built. And it's well worth watching this little demo of how it works, because the guy's an awesome presenter, which is why I thought it was very cool. So you can see in the amount of times it finds different things in here. So different, whether it's Lee Harvey Oswald or it's actually stuff about Cuba is in here as well, interestingly enough. So it even actually does facial recognition. So they uploaded multiple photographs of Lee Harvey Oswald into the image service, can't remember the name of it, and then basically said, if you find one like this, tag it with his name. So it then adds that to the metadata for all of the images that are uploaded. Right? There was some video footage which they could, which also did and sort of transcripted as well. So if you do a search, it'll find not only text, it will find an image and say, this appears to be a picture of this guy posing for the camera, right? This could be you posing for a camera. And the guy actually used it afterwards and searched for his own name and made sure he didn't appear somewhere in the files as well. And then it also is able to create connections. And he didn't realize this when he actually did it, but Azure Search is able to say, these things seem to be related because they appear in the same documents and they appear in these other things, and I think these have relationships. And it turned out that at the time there was also some relationship to Cuba and an operation to do over Castro at the time, and they were going to apparently use poison pills to do that. And that's the inference that it got from all of the documents. And there was some little secret thing that was going on in the background that you wouldn't have known if you hadn't pointed this service at it, which was pretty cool. Yeah, so if you go, have a look and see if you dig out this one. I'll put in the slides kind of what the link is. But it's well worth watching this, because what they do at the end is they actually built a bot as well, and they upload. You can actually ask it questions, and it has speech recognition and a whole bunch of other things built into it that uses the Azure Search to give you the results.
What does it say when you ask who killed JFK?
It says what the official files say. It was Lee Harvey Oswald. It actually also took, because the CIA published a list of acronyms and code names, and there was a code name also for Lee Harvey Oswald that was GJ something or other, and they actually got it to say if you find that name, find this as well, and then you can actually find that in the index as well as the actual original name. So you can do synonyms and things like that. It's pretty cool. Right, the Microsoft Graph. So as Nick mentioned, and he used something very similar to this. This is slightly different to his one, but the Microsoft Graph currently has mostly data from Office 365 services, right? But what they're going to do is extend it so you can add your own content in there. And in fact, if you've looked closely at some of the Graph extensions, there's actually extensions for education, so you can upload students and teachers as entities, assignments, and a whole bunch of other things. And that's partly what Teams is actually leveraging. There's a sort of Teams add-in for education that uses the graph. And the idea is that basically if you've got data and relationships to content that's already in there, you can add those to the graph yourself. So if you've got an application you're building, you can then build in those relationships to the graph and then build an application on top of the graph, right? Rather than the kind of building an application that's isolated from the rest of the content. So people can then start querying all sorts of relationships over that data. That's your internal stuff as well as things that are in Office 365. And then they use this as an example of things you could potentially do in Word. So what he did is he actually typed in, at mentioning someone. One of the things I find when you comment in Word, you can't really say sort of who you want to do something. You can't sort of mention them. You just sort of, hey, can you do this section, and just mention their name. But here you can actually put at the name and then ask them to actually complete a particular section in a document. It's like adding a to-do for somebody else. And it then handles the communicating and notifications to that person to tell them, hey, you've been mentioned that somebody wants your input on this document, and it's right here in this place in the document. The other one is he actually put at to-do, and then said I need to put something in here. So, I mean, commonly we do like RFP responses, and I go, if I could go at to do, we need to write something about Microsoft Teams in this section, and then suddenly it goes off to the Microsoft Graph and says, well, here's some content where you've mentioned Microsoft Teams in the past, and basically, would you like to insert this? Right? So you can imagine if you were writing proposals or legal documents or something where you had to put certain types of clauses or classifications or something in there, and you could just at mention some content you would like to see, and it goes, oh, I'll go find that for you. Right? In reality, how this would actually work largely depends on how much you put into the graph and how much you use the graph. So it kind of gets better over time as it learns what's useful and what other people insert when they're using the tool. I said I'd get to sort of speech recognition. They did this little mock meeting when they had a bunch of people were having a meeting with a Surface. And as the people were talking, it basically recognised what I was saying, so that's the kind of speech to text, which is already available. But as it also recognised the person speaking by their voice, it actually put their icon as to who was speaking. And then that basically gave it a whole transcript of the meeting. So no longer do you need someone to take notes in a meeting or deny that you actually said something in a meeting and say, oh, did you have notes on that? No, I'm sure I didn't say that. So a complete transcript of the meeting. But it also identifies things that are possible actions. So this over this side, sort of the same way if you're using Outlook and it has a message in it where it appears to be asking you to do something. I don't know if you've seen it. It says, oh, there appears to be an action for you here to actually complete something. And then you can actually follow up and create a task or something else out of that. So what this does is through the meeting, it finds everything that it thinks is possibly someone said, oh, I'll do that action, or I'll get somebody else to, or contact somebody to actually get you the information. It actually notes those down as things to do out of the meeting, and then out of that you could potentially create planner tasks or whatever you might want to do for people to actually follow up from that meeting session. And then I think this is the last one I was going to cover, which is, I'll call it app sets, window sets. They're not quite set on the name for sets, but sets. So essentially, what people struggle with is when they're working on a document or some particular content is that you're not just using that one tool. You're probably looking up some websites, maybe using some company data, or essentially more than one source of information to be able to write a document or to work on some code. So what they said is, well, can we organize these into the concept of sets? So let's say you were working on a Word document, and as part of that you might have looked up some things on Wikipedia, you might have gone to the company website, a whole bunch of different places that could be universal apps that are on your device. And what it will do is it will recognize the last time you were working on this, you also had these other tabs open, right? Funny enough, the top looks like markedly like Edge, which I think it probably is partly based on. So if you go, oh yeah, I'd like to reopen those, then it'll actually open up those tabs again, so you can get back to the complete set you were working on when you was working on that document, right? Not just the Word document that you were working on. So these actually store also in a timeline, which I haven't actually got on my machine, but Nick has. He's got the latest build, and I haven't. But essentially what it does is it shows you a timeline of everything you're working on in your machine, and will also include these sets. So it will say, oh, do you want to, you can look back a couple of days or a week ago and go, oh, there was a set of things I was working on. And it'll open up everything that you had in relation to that content. I mean, that's a pretty cool feature. Flow, just a couple of bits on Flow. They announced the app that's going to be added into Excel. So we've done a few sessions on Flow here, a couple of times. So basically an integration, so you can actually go with this line in my Excel, this particular row, I want you to run a flow that might go and get some extra information from somewhere else, and then come back and update your Excel document, right? Sort of right in place as you're using it. So creating sort of additional sort of what people might have built as macros or sort of post updates to your Excel file, you can actually do now with this little Microsoft Flow add-in, which is pretty good. The other one in terms of Flow was looking at approvals. So you can run an approval inside of Flow, but it stores the information only as like you approve or decline it, and it just sends out an email notification. But there's no real tracking or anything that's part of that. And one of the things that people also wanted is to be able to reassign. The amount of people say, oh, I don't want to approve that, I'm just going to delegate it to somebody else. But you could be like away, so you need to reassign it to somebody while you're not in the office. So they're adding these as new features. Those are coming soon. And you'll also be able to add markdown and approval details. So that currently it's like sort of plain text mostly, but you'll be able to actually add more rich information into that approval detail. Oh, and a phone companion. That was one I wanted to cover. I thought, what the hell would I need a phone companion for when they first mentioned this? But I actually showed it as an example that most people actually, when they sit at their desk, have their phone sitting beside them, right? And then you're kind of working away. And I actually did this afternoon after I realised, why would I need this tool? And then suddenly my phone buzzes. I'm like, oh, I wonder what that is, you know. And then you kind of like distracted from your work. So the idea with the phone companion is it's connected to your phone all the time. So rather than it being, you know, this other device you have to pick up and start working with, you can actually just start replying to text messages within the actual phone app itself, right? So you don't need to pick up your phone or get away from your computer and what you're doing. And it also actually works with notifications. So providing it can link into an app on your machine, you can actually then click on a notification that you've got on your phone, and it opens the app on your machine in the location that the notification is referring to, rather than you picking up your phone and going to the location on your phone. So those are more sort of productivity updates that Microsoft are doing. And this one is probably going to be soon. But you can see actually uses sets, which I didn't notice until I looked at this slide later. At the top you can see it's got your phone and then it's got photos, plus any other kind of applications. So actually it's using the sets concept, so you can actually get to different services on your phone. So that was my last one. Anyone think anything there was any part of that you thought was really cool that you want to see us demo at some point?
Flow in Excel.
Yeah.
It's something that I was trying to farm off to a developer today that anyone could probably potentially do.
Yeah.
Like clean up rubbish, address data, go off and do it in bin maps or something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Hopefully that might be a piece of cake.
Yeah. That will be. You can use the Bing search API actually to go check addresses and things. Yeah.
And also that thing where you're going to make SharePoint search work properly by giving it all the goodness of Azure search.
Yeah.
Feature request.
Yeah. Yeah. Not too sure.
It's pretty nice, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I need a big enough. Yeah. I'll think about it. Then probably a way. It's just really whether I can connect up the consumer bit, the ingestion bit, would be the only problem. All right.
Process that you talk about.
Yeah.
Yes, that'll be really interesting to see how it actually works. A lot of the time is restricted into the application
Yeah.
to approval, and so like if we're not restricted on that,
All right.
fantastic.
So it sounds like a bit of a flow session is more likely once that's released, and maybe some Azure search stuff. Yeah. Right, cool. Well, I'll hand over to Daniel then, who's going to talk about, what are you talking about?
No, I'm being Aben tonight.
Oh, you're being Aben.
No, Aben unfortunately he was going to do a demo on Visual Studio Live Share, which is pretty awesome. He can't make it because he's dealing with the P1, so I'm lucky. This is pretty cool stuff.
You're also doing some stuff yourself.
Yeah, I'm doing some stuff of my own stuff. I'm not completely Aben.
Stick it up now.
All right.
This one.
Yeah, this one. Display port.
Display port.
Yeah, or VGA.
Right.
This one.
Okay.
Old school.
Sorry, YouTube, you'll have to miss out.
Oh, is it not gonna?
It's alright.
Oh. Some of the people from our office are actually staying back to watch this. So I've got a lovely assistant. I'm gonna. So, anyone here use Visual Studio or Visual Studio Code? So, oh well, quite a few. So I mean, it's not a develop. A lot of people go, oh, it's a developer tool, don't worry. But if you're editing text files and ARM templates or any kind of document, text-based document, Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio is a pretty useful tool. Being a PowerShell person, I use Visual Studio Code all the time. Sometimes do Visual Studio. Ooh, is that looking
Promising.
promising?
Dude with the adapter.
So Microsoft they announced this a while ago, and they've had it for a while, and it's been in private preview for a little bit. I didn't get myself onto the private preview for some reason. I wasn't cool enough, but they released this at Build, and what it essentially allows you to do is allows anyone with using Visual Studio Code or Visual Studio or on Windows, Linux or Mac, so pretty much anything, to
Forget it. Let's just drop this over here. Go VGA.
technical VG, going old school. So it allows anyone to basically collaboratively code. I hate that word. So it allows them to work together on the same piece of code, the same project, but the person who is connecting, or the people who are connecting to that session, don't need to have any of the files, they don't need to have any of the dependencies, they don't have to be working on the same type of operating system. So I could be on a Windows PC, and someone else could be on a Mac. They could be, fire across. They could be using Linux. They could be using Visual Studio, 2017. Even though I'm using Visual Studio, and we can work on the same code, we can debug it together. If I start running the code, they can put breakpoints in, step through it. So I'm going to actually run this. I'm going to do one of these. First, I'll show you how to get it all set up. I'm just going to connect up to my cell phone. Need internet to do this. So bear with me. And I have a lovely helper over here in the front, and we're actually going to do a live coding session. I'm going to use an ARM template and a PowerShell script. Well, just make that a little bigger. How's that? So, first thing you're going to need is you're going to need to add the extension. Now, if you're using Visual Studio, you would go in and I'll quickly load Visual Studio. You would go and add just go into the extensions and updates, and you want to add this VS Live Share preview. It's still in preview. There's a few little glitches. You add that, install that extension, and you're pretty much good to go. You just got to sign in. But I'll go and do that on Visual Studio Code. So Visual Studio, same thing. Head over here to extensions and go look for VS Live. There we go, first one in there. Don't know why it's telling me to reload, but I better just in case. So the VS Live code share, we'd install that. I have actually already installed it, but I'm going to reload Visual Studio. What I've typically then got to do is, once I find someone who wants to code with me, someone who's going to help me out. Now, some of the scenarios here might be, coding together, working on a piece of code. You might work with your security teams to get them to review some code and look at an ARM template and say, hey, are those network security groups good? We're going to be good with this. Or just helping out one of your fellow, one of your guys that got a problem. They're trying to debug some code. Just general teaching. So there's so many opportunities here. So what I'm going to do is, it's telling me it's going to finishing the VS Live Share installation. I think actually what it's done is they've actually just updated the extension, which is good. Which is good. So we'll just wait for now. What it's going to do is it actually signs me in. Normally, when the first time round, it's going to ask me to sign in. I can sign in with a GitHub account or just a normal Microsoft account. So any Microsoft Live account. I've actually signed in using my work account. It doesn't mean, like if I sign in using my work account, it doesn't mean I can't collaborate with someone outside work. It's just an identity. So I've got this nice little identity here thing saying I've got Live Share all set up. All I have to do is click Share. And what it's going to do is it's going to copy a link to my clipboard. And all I have to do is send that link to whoever I want to collaborate with, and they will be able to join in. So it's going to tell me I've copied this link to the dashboard. Don't send it to someone. Don't send it to some hacker. Don't just know who you're sending it to. I'm actually going to use Yammer. I should use Teams, of course, but that's another story. So I'm sending it to David. We've actually tried this with 3 people. Coding gets chaotic. Everyone's overtyping everyone else's code. It's a lot of fun, but I wouldn't. So what's going to happen now is David's going to get that link, and when he clicks it, he'll get pop-up. And if he's got Visual Studio Code and Visual Studio, it'll actually say, hey, which one do you want to open this in? And he can choose, I want to feel like coding in Visual Studio 2017 today. Now again, he doesn't have any of my code. This project, it's a bunch of Azure, it's a bunch of ARM templates and PowerShell. He doesn't have any of that on his computer. So I didn't have to, git clone it and send them a zip file or whatever of all this code. So whilst we wait for him to open it. So what it does when it actually connects, first thing it does is it downloads all of these files, some temporary location on his machine or something, and it'll pop up on my screen in a moment. It'll say, David's connected to your session. Get rid of that. And I'll go, great, that's great. And he will be able to start typing in. I'm going to open up this My Awesome Script window. We'll go for Key Vault. In here, we'll wait for.
Sorry, Dan, just while we're waiting. So how long does that link valid for last?
It's a good question. I have no idea. Until I close the collaboration session, I'm pretty assured.
Right,
I don't think it is. Yeah, so it's just like a session key. I'll show you if anyone else wants to jump in, they have this. There you go. There's the link I get. So that identity is basically a unique identity for my particular session. So yeah, you send that. I don't know if there's an upper limit to the number of people who can collaborate, but we're actually all collaborating in the cloud. So we're actually hitting a cloud service. So, but if you're inside an internal network, you can actually, where you're on the same subnet, you can actually connect point to point. So it can actually go a lot faster. So David is now, you can see David's now quite happily messing up my ARM template. By the way, this is a production ARM template. So he's able to, now I can see what he's doing, and I can of course continue to work and say, okay, I'm also going to mess this up. So we can both work together. We can work together. Obviously, we can break it. So the thing is, what you can't see on his screen is he's able to get all the IntelliSense that I get. So he's able to see this ARM template, the Azure goodness that you get in Visual Studio when you're editing ARM templates. He can, even if he's looking at code, you can peek definitions. I don't know if anyone's familiar with peek. All of the neat functionality you get with Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code works. But what I can also do now. This is a bit harder to see because you can't see his screen. I can say, hey, look, what if I go? Hey, let's go work on another file. Now he's not following me anymore, but I can say, okay, hang on. I want you to focus on me. I want you to follow my cursor. Stop doing your own thing. Now he gets a little request saying, oh, Daniel wants you to follow him. Yeah, get focused. Stop messing around with the other files. Now he will, and I start moving my cursor, and on his screen, he's able to follow, and I jump to a different file, and I start doing this. He will continue following me, but of course he can still, if he decides, it's like having cruise control on your car. If he touches anything, if he goes and starts typing somewhere, it turns off follow mode. So I'm not completely controlling on him. Now, what we were going to do is we're going to quickly show debugging. So I've got this awesome PowerShell script. Now it's broken. Anyone care to see where it's broken? Yeah, I'm a terrible speller. So anyway, what we can do is David, do you want to set a breakpoint on just before the get process X line? So if you just click the little F9, press F9, so you can see he set the breakpoint. And we can run this, I'll go run this code. So as you can see now, I've started running this code. He gets access to all of these variables on his machine. He can actually go and edit them on my machine. So do you want to go and let's see, I didn't actually declare any variables, which is a bit silly. So hang on, I'm going to stop this. I'm going to declare a variable. I'm going to say my var equals hello world. Wow, so adjective. I'm going to run that again. This time. So there we go. And now you can see over here my var hello world. So you should be able to click on that and edit it. I've never tried this before. I should say I've only ever tried this on Visual Studio 2017. So as you can see, he changed his comment to all done. So it doesn't actually look like it's shown up. It's changed it for you, but not for me. So that might be something they need to fix. But it does on Visual Studio. If you do it on the Visual Studio 2017, it actually updates the variable. So.
But
Okay, so if you step into the next command, right? So okay, so it actually it seems to have updated it now, so you can see he adjusted my variable on his system. Now, of course, if we step in, do you want to step to the next command? It's going to, of course, throw an error. So there's our lovely error down the bottom there. So I can then go and say, actually, hang on, that's dude totally wrong. Let's go back and what is it? Yeah, so no, it only does that. Does anyone remember the shortcut for set next command? F turn. No, it's Alt F turn. Let's try it. See, I obviously don't do this very often. No, is it? No, it's not doing it. So we could have gone and changed that code, continued on running it. So basically, yeah, you can debug, you can do everything you would do together. You can have multiple people in there. It gets pretty chaotic.
So what do you really give access to? All the folders or what's open in
Yep.
Visual Studio or whatever?
Exactly. So if you open a solution, they get access to the whole solution. If you open in Visual Studio Code, you open a folder, they get access to everything in the folder. We've had one of our team today when they opened Visual Studio Code to their root drive, which, of course, their sharing session potentially allowed me to go and change any file on their computer. So that's a bad no-no. One other thing where you can do, and this is a terrible high risk, is you can share your terminal. Now that might not be a bad thing, but you can share it read-write. Now if I was running administrator mode, now David could now type format C:, but he won't because I trust him. So, and we found this odd little thing which they may have to fix, is that it gives you a few little characters. So don't really, seriously don't. So yeah, we found this. It seems to present the code, but I mean, I could go and we could be using, say, if you've got a production issue, you don't want to be, your operation teams aren't going to give you access to those systems, but you might be able to say, hey, look, can we run a bit of a session where I can get, run some commands to look at the state of the system. So there's a lot of opportunities for this. Still in preview, as you can see, there's a few weird glitches and bugs. And maybe a few. Luckily, I'm not an local administrator right now, so he can't do that. I don't know why he's putting Chinese in there. Anyway, so that's the live share. I was Aben. I wasn't really. I'll now jump into the next bit. I'll first disconnect my session. Surprised none of you jumped in while I was there and just started hacking away. Now I've got to revert all the changes.
I figured out why this wasn't working.
Oh,
yeah.
Do you want to swap over?
Yeah, maybe 30 seconds.
Cool. Okay.
Keep talking.
Okay, so I'll keep talking. Like that. Okay. Okay. Oh, legend. Okay, and then I'll press this button and everything will break. Yeah. No. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Man, the demo gods are completely smiling, mostly. I say that now and everything will break. So yeah, some of the call-outs for me, there was heaps of cool stuff, but a lot of it was sort of buried in amongst so much other cool stuff. But personally, and for our team, which they're all sitting up front here, one of the big ones was Azure Cosmos DB and a VNet. If you've used Cosmos DB or you've used storage or SQL Server, you kind of go, when you say to your security teams, hey, we're going to put a SQL Server out there, an Azure SQL instance, and they go, cool, so what networks are going to be in? And you still have to go, oh, it's going to be in a public cloud. It's on a public endpoint. And they go, yeah, okay. And that was pretty much Cosmos. Your security teams are a little bit apprehensive. You're putting a hell of a lot of data up there, and it could be sensitive. So up until now, you haven't been able to put a Cosmos DB in a virtual network. So that was one of the big call-outs. So basically, you can now put Cosmos DB in a virtual network But because Cosmos DB, anyone here using Cosmos, by the way? Hey, that's quite a few. So Cosmos DB is a globally distributed database, or replicated database. So if I deploy one of these things, it can be made available in all over the world with different endpoints. So when you do it, when you add a Cosmos to a VNet, you actually have to add it to a VNet in each region. So if you've got one in Australia and it's replicated out across to Western Europe, you've got to put it both endpoints in a VNet. And one thing about this as well is that although it puts it in the VNet, there is still a public endpoint available. So you still have the ability to say, a lot of people will deploy Cosmos and then they'll use some automation to upload stored procedures and all sorts of stuff. You need to be able to still access that VNet for, say, some of your automation tasks. So you can actually add this Cosmos to a VNet, and then set some custom firewall rules around the public endpoint to say, hey, I only want to allow my specific IP to access the Cosmos DB publicly. Everyone else has to come through the VNet. So this is really good for security and just for deploying this thing. So when you create it, basically you've got this option. You can see there, we actually got one running. So, except my session has expired and hang on. So I'll just quickly show you what that looks like. How are we doing for time? Cool.
Dan, is there any word on provisioning other resources within the same VNet?
It is coming. So at the moment, there's only 3 resource types that can be provisioned as a service endpoint. So that's Azure Storage Accounts, Azure SQL, and Azure Cosmos. But I believe there'll be other services that will be exposed as a service endpoint later on. I mean, it seems to be the way they're going. And it's pretty awesome because what it does is it actually adds a DNS entry into your VNet, so that if you resolve my cosmosdb.document.net, I think is the URL, it actually resolves to the internal IP using Azure DNS. So that's pretty cool. So I think a lot of these services have to leverage these the functionality that was also provided just prior to build was Azure DNS, being able to create your own custom DNS entries in Azure DNS. Is everyone aware you can do that now? So that was so you can how you create a VNet and you can assign you say I want to use Azure DNS on this VNet. You can actually create your own custom DNS entries in that VNet. You can only do it via PowerShell at the moment, but it's now available, so you could have your own internal name resolution inside that VNet without building a big DNS server, which is the way you used to do it in the past.
Just duplicate your screen.
Okay. Yeah, you can't see.
Windows P. Duplicate.
There we go. Legend, Daryl, thank you. So I've got a Cosmos DB here. I'll just show you what firewall screen now looks like within the Cosmos. So if we go and have a look at our Cosmos DB, I've got a VNet here, of course, and I've added my Cosmos DB into it. Just make it a little bit bigger for everyone. So I've now got this new firewall and virtual networks down here. And this allows me, so for every region I've exposed, I need to set up a virtual network, connect it to a virtual network. You probably could have some regions inside a virtual network and others not. I don't know if you'd want to do that, but you could. So with this, you would set up your virtual network. So there's a virtual network I've bounded into. And I get these other firewall options, which were the same as previous. So the point is, that public endpoint doesn't go away. It's still there. You've now firewalled off by default when you add it to a VNet. So, so that's that one. So the other one that I found was quite Azure Storage Explorer. Is anyone here using it or not using it? Thank you, Daryl. Anyone using?
Touch screen.
And allows you to manipulate storage and manage storage and browse storage and no, that's yep, there we go. Let's try that again.
Just restart the slideshow from there. So go back to extend, and then fire it up again.
Cool tool. It's just really handy to go browse storage. I won't show it, but basically, yeah, it's Windows and Linux, but it does allow you to browse Cosmos DB databases. But of course, if you've made your database inside of VNet, you won't get there. So make sure you've opened your public endpoint before you try and use Azure Storage Explorer to browse your endpoints. But in the absence of time, I won't jump in, won't give you a demo of that. I think just go download it. It's a pretty cool tool. The next thing that I thought was pretty cool was Azure Kubernetes Service. So Kubernetes Service has sort of been around a while in preview, and it's still in preview, and they've said, in 2 weeks it's going to be GA. So Azure Kubernetes Service was their managed version of ACS, or Azure Container Service, running Kubernetes. So if you've ever spun up an ACS or an Azure Container Service with Kubernetes, it basically spins all the VMs up and connects everything up and says, here's a bunch of infrastructure you have to manage. With AKS, it abstracts that process away and says, well, I'll just give you an AKS endpoint and all the VMs will be running by us and we'll manage them and we'll patch them for you. You just don't have to worry about it. So it's the managed version of all that stuff. It's really, really pretty cool, especially if you're running any kind of containers. Kubernetes is the orchestration platform you're probably going to head towards. So they've done a lot of work on it to get it ready for GA. There's a new portal experience, which I'll quickly show you. There's DevOps project support. So there's this cool thing in Azure where you can say, I want to build something with DevOps. I want to get into this DevOps thing. And they've had support for things like web apps, app services, and other technologies. They've added now AKS, so you can say, hey, look, I want a Kubernetes cluster, I want it run, I want to build an app in it, and I want it highly available, and it just does everything for you. So it sets up the Visual Studio Team Services project, and it hooks up the build, and does everything, and you just have a running Kubernetes server with an app. It's very cool. So BYO VNet, so previously with Kubernetes, it actually runs in a virtual network, has its own virtual network. Previously, you had to basically just use the virtual network they gave you, and if you wanted other stuff in there, tough luck, or if you wanted to use an existing virtual network, tough luck. But now you can have a virtual network, might have a bunch of other virtual machines. You can just say, build me my Kubernetes service in this VNet. But the cool thing, Azure Monitor integration. This is what I'm going to show you because it is pretty cool. And also Windows containers. Kubernetes was primarily, it can run Linux and Windows containers, but the AKS was only doing Linux initially. Now they're doing Windows as well, but that's in private preview. So let's see how well we can switch over again. Okay, so I have a Kubernetes cluster that I have provisioned earlier. Previously, if it was an ACS, I would have seen a whole lot of resources below here, but now I see one resource, which is my AKS container service. So the new portal experience sort of comes up when you open it up. You get this nice new sort of landing page, which allows you to show the dashboard, which is an internal container inside the cluster, which actually shows you all the things that are running on it and how they're doing. But the cool thing is this container health stuff. So you can click that, or you can go down and go into this health preview. You can hook it up after you've deployed the AKS, or you can hook it up during. When you deploy an AKS, it gives you a little wizard. You can you can set up health at that point. What it's actually doing, you need a log analytics workspace, so an OMS workspace, and it just sends all of that logs, all of that information from the cluster off into that workspace, and then gives you this nice view over top of it. And you can also, it sends all the internal logs of the container. So if you're running, say, a SQL server in a container, that SQL Server is going to be generating a bunch of logs. All of those logs are going to be sent across to the Log Analytics workspace, and you can just use them like any other log you'd ingested into Log Analytics. So I'll show you that in a moment. But first, this is what we get. We get nodes, controllers, and containers. So we can go and look at each of our nodes. I provisioned a 2-node container cluster. So there's 2 worker nodes essentially running my workloads. And I might have 10 containers on each, but so you can actually see the average CPU usage or is 15% for that node. So I can get a quick understanding. Say, is my cluster being hammered, or is it underutilized? I can expand that and look at what services are running on my cluster. So I can see I've got the OMS agent. Now this is the thing that gets added when you add the log analytics. It creates a container called the OMS agent, which takes all of the logs and information out of your node and sends it off to log analytics for you. So let's go over to containers. That's a little bit more interesting. So containers, these are all the containers that are actually running on my servers in any way, shape, or form, and I can have a look and see what sort of usage they're getting out of it. So the tunnel front end is actually the biggest usage, and that's actually where all my container APIs and everything hits. So that's pretty cool. You can also do a bunch of other stuff by jumping straight into the actual log analytics. So I'll go back to it here. Now, in the absence of time, I know we're actually running pretty close. So you can actually use the search logs button. Now that's going to load log analytics, and it actually I'm going to jump back. Sorry, I'll jump back and show you something cooler. Go back to the container health. I'll go back to my containers, back to where I was. You can actually say, hey, look, I want to know, where is it? It's actually over here on the right, but the window's not. You can click any of these containers, right? I was running an app at one point on here, but I don't see it anymore. I can click the view logs. What that's going to do is it's actually going to take me over to log analytics, give me a query that will show me all the logs that have come out of that container. So I can easily, so I don't have to write the query myself, because log analytics queries for the uninitiated it's got a bit of a ramp up, got a bit of a learning curve. So I don't know what this is. This is asking me to open this in a new window, but I'll try. Hey, this is in preview, by the way. So if there may be portal issues. Let's try. Let's have a look at the log analytics from the actual OMS agent. So everyone here familiar or not familiar with OMS, log analytics? Cool. Well, a log analytics is this thing that just brings up a black screen and it says to open a new window. It's really cool. Normally this would bring up the log analytics window, and log analytics is a pretty awesome tool. I just don't know why it's.
It was working 2 hours ago.
Yeah.
I looked at it.
Yeah, I don't understand. So anyway, it would bring up a query. You'd be able to look at it. You'd be able to adjust it, and it would show you all the logs. You can even then graph that and do all sorts of wonderful things with it. So it is a pretty cool tool. So AKS is, I would say, if you're holding off because you're waiting for it to go into GA, it's going to go GA in a couple of weeks. And if you're thinking, am I going to use Azure Container Service or AKS, I would hold out, go AKS all the way. It is really cool. Anyone who's stood up an ACS and managed an Azure Container Service, you've got to patch it, you've got to worry about it and care about it, and it's it's fiddly. So AKS is definitely the way to go. Now I know we've got an absence of time, so I'm going to skip over the last two. I was going to talk about Azure Service Fabric Mesh, which is the hardcore of the hardcore. But we'll skip that. And there's a whole lot of changes to Azure App Service. Again, this is all about multi-container support. You can now run Windows containers within Azure App Service. So previously you can only run Linux containers in an app service instance. Now you can run Windows. You can also run Docker Compose images. So if you've got a Docker Compose, so you've got an application that's an API with a couple of web app with a couple of APIs running an app service. They're all in containers. You can actually just use a Docker Compose to build that entire thing in one app service plan using one click. Durable functions went to GA as well. So that's it. There's so much stuff. I really could have gone on. Everyone knows that. So thanks very much for listening, and pretty much right on the mark. Cheers, guys.
That's it. Thanks a lot, everyone, for coming along. I hope you enjoyed our recount of our favourite bits of build. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. As you know, new stuff comes out all the time. So if you're interested in this sort of stuff, and it's your first time today, as I said before, come along next time, tell your friends about it. And if you're interested in us presenting on anything, please let us know through the meetup group. So I already had a couple of suggestions tonight around Flow and Excel. And what was the other one? I don't know, I made a note of it.
Search.
Yes, cognitive search versus SharePoint search and all that. So any other suggestions that something you particularly want us to cover, please let us know through Meetup, and we'll do our best to accommodate. So, awesome. So our next one, I think, is 13th of June, third Wednesday of every month, and the Meetup will be usually announced a couple of weeks before that. So, thanks a lot for coming along. See you next time.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Awesome stuff. Super. Cheers.